All right, you sick fucks. Buckle up, because this week,
Oh, God.
we're diving headfirst into the shitstorm that is natural disasters.
Here we go.
We've got a mountain of research. Wikipedia, basically.
All the hits.
On all the batshit crazy ways Mother Nature can try to wipe us off the map. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes blowing their tops, you name it.
It's all here.
We're covering it.
It's a pretty wild ride when you think about it.
No shit.
Yeah.
And get this, we've been calling these things natural disasters.
Right.
Like we're just innocent bystanders. What a load of crap.
Yeah. It is a bit misleading, isn't it? The term natural disaster implies that humans are merely helpless victims in all of this.
Right.
But the truth is, like, what the hell are we supposed to do?
We play a pretty big role in turning natural hazards into full-blown disasters.
Exactly. It's like calling a hurricane a natural disaster while ignoring the fact that we built a bunch of shitty condos right on the fucking beach.
Precisely. It's the intersection of natural hazards and human choices, societal vulnerabilities,
Ooh.
if you will.
That really defines a disaster.
So a hurricane might hit a rich-ass country
Right.
with solid infrastructure and barely make a dent. But that same hurricane could slam into a country with shoddy buildings and zero preparedness
Yeah.
and wipe the whole damn place off the map.
That's a perfect example. And it's not just about physical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Social factors play a huge role, too. Remember the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami?
Oh, yeah.
More women died than men, partly because fewer women knew how to swim due to cultural norms.
Fuck, that's messed up.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the tsunami itself.
Nope.
It was the societal bullshit that made women more vulnerable.
Exactly. And the aftermath. Forget about it. Sexual violence disease, mental health crises.
All the good stuff.
These things explode after disasters. And they're not just natural consequences. They're a direct result of the inequalities and vulnerabilities that we as a society have allowed to fester.
So we're not just victims of natural disasters. We're also victims of our own screw-ups.
Pretty much.
Okay, so we've established that natural disasters is a bullshit term. But what are some specific examples of how we screw ourselves over when it comes to these events?
Well, take shoddy construction in earthquake zones. Buildings collapse not just because the ground shakes, but because they were built like shit.
Like those buildings that pancake during earthquakes, that's some nightmare fuel right there.
Exactly. And then there's ignoring fire risks. Wildfires can be catastrophic.
Oh, shit.
But we often make them worse by building homes right next to forests or not managing vegetation properly. We're practically begging for it.
So we're not just victims. We're setting ourselves up for a major ass-kicking.
It seems that way.
But hey, at least we're getting better at dealing with this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Didn't you say the death rate from these disasters has actually gone down?
That's true. Over the last century, the death rate from natural disasters has plummeted by a whopping 75%.
Well, hot damn.
Mhm.
There's a sliver of hope in this shitstorm after all.
It is encouraging. It shows that with better preparation, education, and disaster response systems, we can significantly reduce the human cost of these events.
So are we winning the war against Mother Nature?
We're
Becoming masters of disaster?
not so fast. Here's where things get really interesting, and by interesting, I mean terrifying. Climate change is throwing a goddamn wrench into the works. It's making extreme weather events more frequent and more intense.
All right. Climate change. Always got to piss on the parade.
It's not about pissing on any parades. It's about facing reality. As the planet warms, we're seeing more heat waves, droughts, wildfires, stronger hurricanes, and rising sea levels, all of which dramatically increase the risks associated with certain natural hazards.
So we might be getting better at handling the natural part of natural disasters, but the disasters themselves are getting worse because of our own goddamn actions. Talk about shooting ourselves in the foot.
That's a good way to put it. We're in a race against time. We need to adapt and improve our disaster risk reduction strategies faster than climate change is intensifying the hazards.
So we're playing catch-up with a planet that's pissed off.
Lovely.
What specific types of disasters should people be shitting their pants over?
Well, let's start with the geological mayhem, landslides, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. These are events that can literally reshape the landscape and cause massive destruction in the blink of an eye.
Landslides seem pretty straightforward. A big chunk of Earth decides to go for a joyride downhill.
True, but what's fascinating is that they're often triggered by human activities like deforestation or building on unstable slopes. We make ourselves vulnerable.
And earthquakes. Those are the ones where the ground shakes like a mofo and buildings crumble, right?
Exactly. Earthquakes are caused by the movement of tectonic plates. And while we can't prevent them, we can definitely do a better job of building structures that can withstand them.
And let's not forget the OG disaster of volcanic eruptions.
Ah, yes. Molten rock ash clouds, pyroclastic flows, nature's fireworks shogun, terribly, terribly wrong.
Pompeii anyone. Not a good way to go.
Definitely not. And while major volcanic eruptions are relatively rare, they can have global impacts. We're talking about ash clouds disrupting air travel, volcanic winters, causing crop failures, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so we've got the ground shaking, the mountains exploding. What else is on the disaster menu?
Next up, we've got the wild world of extreme weather events. Heat waves, droughts, hurricanes, the list goes on.
Heat waves seem pretty self-explanatory. It gets hot as balls, people start dropping like flies.
It's more than just uncomfortable heat. Heat waves can lead to dehydration, heat stroke, and death, especially for vulnerable populations like the elderly or those with underlying health conditions.
And droughts, those are just a pain in the ass, right? Like having to ration your water usage.
Droughts can be much more severe than that. They can devastate agriculture, lead to water shortages, and cause widespread economic hardship. We're talking about mass migrations, social unrest, the whole shebang.
And hurricanes. Those are the ones that spin like a top and rip shit upright.
Hurricanes are powerful tropical storms with high winds, torrential rains, and storm surges. They can cause massive flooding, damage infrastructure, and displace entire communities.
So basically, we're fucked. Is that the takeaway here?
Not necessarily, but we need to be aware of the risks and take steps to mitigate them. We can't just sit back and wait for the next disaster to strike. We need to be proactive, we need to be prepared, and we need to start making some serious changes.
Damn. This is some heavy shit. But hey, you've got to admit there's something morbidly fascinating about all this chaos, right? It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, but with a planet-sized train.
I suppose there's a certain allure to the unpredictable nature of these events. And while it's important to acknowledge the destruction and suffering they cause, it's also crucial to understand the forces at play, the delicate balance between nature's power and human vulnerability.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on part 1 of our disaster deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground from exploding mountains to pissed-off hurricanes. Stick around, we'll be right back after a quick break to delve even deeper into this fucked-up world of natural disasters.
All right, let's keep this disaster train rolling. We've talked about the big picture, the whole natural disasters being a load of crap and all that. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Get into the weeds.
And dissect some specific types of disasters.
That sounds good to me. What's first on the chopping block?
Let's talk earthquakes.
Always a crowd pleaser. Nothing like a little terra firma tango to get the blood pumping.
Well, maybe not for the folks actually experiencing them.
Probably not.
Imagine the ground beneath you shaking violently, buildings swaying like drunken sailors, and the sound of concrete and steel groaning like a death metal concert.
Yeah, I'll pass on that front row seat.
Yeah.
But why are earthquakes so damn destructive? Is it just the shaking, or is there more to it?
The shaking is definitely a big part of it, but the severity of an earthquake's impact often boils down to, you guessed it, human factors.
Let me guess, shitty building codes.
Bingo. In countries with strict seismic building codes, structures are designed to withstand even powerful earthquakes with minimal damage.
Like those videos you see of skyscrapers in Japan swaying back and forth during an earthquake. They look like they're about to topple over.
Oh, yeah.
But then they just kind of bounce back.
Exactly. But in places with lax or unenforced building codes, even a moderate earthquake can turn cities into rubble.
So basically, if you're in a place with shitty building codes, you're fucked.
It's a recipe for disaster.
So if you live in a place with building codes that are about as useful as a screen door on a submarine,
Right.
you're basically screwed when the big one hits.
It's not quite that simple, but you're not far off. Human decisions about building practices have a massive impact on the outcome of a natural disaster. We're talking about the difference between a few cracks in the pavement and thousands of people losing their lives.
Okay, building codes, got it.
Yeah.
What else should people be aware of?
Think about population density. Earthquakes in densely populated areas are obviously going to have a higher potential for casualties and damage. More people crammed into a smaller space equals more potential victims.
Makes sense. More people, more problems, as they say.
Precisely. And let's not forget the economic angle. Earthquakes in wealthier countries often result in lower death tolls, but higher economic losses, because there's simply more infrastructure to damage.
So it's like a rich country might have better buildings that can handle the shaking,
Right.
but they also have more expensive shit to get wrecked.
Exactly. The economic impact of an earthquake can be staggering, even in developed countries. We're talking about billions, even trillions of dollars in damage.
All right, let's move on to another fan favorite, hurricanes. Those swirling bastards seem to get a lot of airtime these days.
Hurricanes are a textbook example of how human choices can amplify the destructive power of a natural event.
Give me the lowdown. How are we screwing ourselves over when it comes to hurricanes?
Coastal development is a big one. Building homes and infrastructure right on the goddamn coastline in hurricane-prone areas
Yeah.
is like setting up a buffet for a hungry storm surge.
Like building a house of cards on a slip-and slide. Sooner or later, it's all going down.
That's a pretty accurate analogy. And it's not just about building in the wrong places. It's about how we build. Structures designed to withstand hurricane-force winds and storm surges have a much better chance of surviving. But if you're building with cheap materials and cutting corners,
Of course.
you're basically asking for trouble.
So building codes are back in the spotlight.
You bet. But there's another culprit in the mix. Deforestation forests act as natural buffers against hurricanes,
Never thought about that.
absorbing wind and rainfall like giant sponges.
But we're busy turning those sponges into toothpicks.
Unfortunately, yes. Deforestation means that when hurricanes hit, they often cause much more severe flooding and erosion.
So we're not just sitting ducks, we're actively making the ducks bigger and angrier.
That's one way to put it. And then there are the social and economic factors that come into play during hurricane season.
Like what? Give me some example.
Evacuation orders, for one. People who can't afford to evacuate or who don't have access to transportation are left behind in the path of the storm.
And that's where things get really dicey.
Absolutely. And think about the aftermath of a hurricane. Communities with strong social networks and support systems tend to recover faster.
Interesting.
They can rely on each other, share resources, and rebuild together.
So it's not just about surviving the storm itself. It's about how well prepared and resilient a community is beforehand.
That's a critical point. Disaster preparedness and community resilience are essential for minimizing the impact of these events. It's not just about luck, it's about being ready for the shit to hit the fan.
Okay, we've covered earthquakes and hurricanes. What else is on this apocalyptic hit list?
Well, we can't talk about disasters without addressing the elephant in the room, climate change.
Ugh, yeah.
Yep.
That's the big kahuna, the ultimate party pooper.
Climate change isn't just a disaster in itself, it's a threat multiplier. It's taking all the natural hazards we've been talking about and cranking them up to 11.
It's like Mother Nature got a hold of some performance-enhancing drugs.
In a way, yes. Climate change is causing sea levels to rise, which means coastal areas are becoming even more vulnerable to storm surges and flooding.
So all that hurricane damage we talked about earlier, it's about to get a whole lot worse.
You got it. And it's not just coastal areas that are at risk. Climate change is also contributing to more extreme heat waves, droughts, and wildfires. It's like a buffet of biblical proportions.
So basically, we're screwed. Is that the final verdict? Are we all just going to fry, drown, or burn?
Not necessarily. We understand the science behind climate change, and we know what steps need to be taken to mitigate its effects. The question is, do we have the will to act before it's too late?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone loves to talk about climate change, but actually doing something about it? Not so much.
It's a complex issue with political, economic, and social factors all tangled up in a big, messy knot. But one thing's for sure, we can't afford to be complacent. Climate change is a clear and present danger, and we need to act now, not later.
Okay, so maybe we're not all doomed just yet. But this is some seriously heavy stuff. Can we lighten the mood a bit? Talk about something a little more uplifting, like, I don't know, puppies, rainbows.
Puppies and rainbows. While charming, I'm not sure they're quite relevant to our discussion on natural disasters.
All right, fine. But seriously, is there anything positive to take away from all this doom and gloom?
Actually, yes. Humans are incredibly resilient creatures. We have an amazing ability to adapt and innovate in the face of adversity.
Give me some examples. How are we turning this disaster ship around?
Think about the technological advancements that have emerged from disaster response efforts. Early warning systems for tsunamis, sophisticated search and rescue techniques. We're constantly improving our ability to deal with these events and save lives.
So we're learning from our mistakes. Maybe we're not as dumb as we look.
Absolutely. And we're sharing that knowledge globally. International cooperation on disaster risk reduction is increasing, with countries working together to develop best practices and provide assistance to those in need.
So it's like a global disaster support group, sharing tips on how not to get completely fucked by Mother Nature.
In a way, yes. We're recognizing that we're all in this together and that collaboration is key to facing the challenges of natural hazards and climate change.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool. It's nice to know that we're not all just sitting around waiting for the sky to fall.
And there's more. Disasters often reveal the best of humanity. We see incredible acts of courage, compassion, and resilience in the face of tragedy.
Like those stories of people risking their own lives to rescue their neighbors from flooded homes
Yeah.
or sharing their food and water with strangers.
Exactly. Disasters remind us of our shared humanity, our capacity for kindness and generosity in the face of unimaginable hardship.
So it's not all doom and gloom after all.
Not at all. While disasters can be devastating, they can also be catalysts for positive change. They can spur innovation, foster cooperation, and inspire us to build a better, more resilient future.
This has been a roller coaster of emotions, man. One minute we're talking about the end of the world.
I know.
The next minute we're celebrating the indomitable spirit of humanity.
That's the nature of this topic. It's complex, it's challenging, but it's also incredibly important. We need to talk about it, we need to understand it, and we need to take action.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our disaster deep dive. From shaky ground to swirling storms, we've explored how human choices intersect with natural hazards to create the perfect shitstorm. But stick around, folks. We'll be back after a quick break to wrap things up and leave you with some final thoughts on this wild ride we call life on planet Earth. All right, you disaster junkies, we're back for the grand finale of this natural disaster extravaganza. We've laughed, we've cried, we've contemplated building an underground bunker,
All the essentials.
stocked with enough booze and ramen noodles to last through the apocalypse.
Sounds like my kind of party.
But before we send you back into the real world to face the impending doom, let's recap some key takeaways.
All right.
And maybe find a glimmer of hope in all this chaos.
Excellent point. It's time for a little dose of reality, a shot of truth serum to chase down all that disaster talk.
Yeah? Hit me with your wisdom, oh wise one. What have we learned from this roller coaster ride through the world of natural disasters?
First and foremost, we need to ditch the tired old idea that these events are just natural disasters. They're not some random acts of God. They're not Mother Nature having a bad hair day. Disasters are a complex cocktail of natural hazards mixed with a hefty dose of human stupidity.
Right. It's not just about Mother Nature being a bitch. It's about us being dumbasses. We build shit in stupid places, ignore warning signs, and then act all surprised when the shit hits the fan.
Exactly. Our actions and inactions, our societal structures and vulnerabilities,
The whole shebang.
all contribute to turning natural hazards into full-blown disasters.
So what can we do about it?
Yeah.
How do we break this cycle of self-inflicted destruction? Do we all need to become survivalist hermits living off the grid?
Well, building a bunker isn't a bad idea, but it's not exactly a solution for everyone.
True.
The first step is awareness.
Okay.
We need to understand the risks we face, acknowledge our role in shaping the impact of these events, and stop blaming everything on Mother Nature.
Knowledge is power, as they say. But how do we translate that knowledge into action?
Once we have a grasp on the risks, we can start making smarter choices. We can demand stricter building codes, invest in early warning systems, and implement sustainable land management practices.
So we need to be proactive, not reactive.
Yeah.
Don't wait for the hurricane to hit before you board up the windows.
Precisely. We need to shift our focus from disaster response to disaster risk reduction. It's about anticipating risks and taking steps to minimize them before they turn into catastrophes.
Sounds like a lot of work. Can't we just leave it to the government or something?
While governments and institutions play a crucial role, individuals can make a difference too. It's about taking responsibility for our own safety and the well-being of our communities.
Okay, so what can regular folks like us actually do? Besides stockpiling toilet paper and bottled water, of course.
Plenty. Start by educating yourself about the hazards in your area.
Okay.
Learn about evacuation routes, create a disaster preparedness kit, and have a plan in place for your family.
So like basic survival shit. Knowing how to start a fire with sticks and purify water with a sock.
It's a good start, but it goes beyond that. Get involved in your community. Support organizations working on disaster risk reduction. Advocate for policies that promote sustainability and resilience.
Got it.
Make your voice heard.
So we need to be informed, prepared, and engaged. No pressure.
And here's a final thought to leave you with. We've talked a lot about the destructive power of nature, but let's not forget about the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Time and time again, we see people coming together in the face of adversity, helping each other, rebuilding their lives, and finding hope amidst the rubble.
Yeah, humans are pretty badass when we want to be.
We are indeed. So while the future may seem uncertain, let's not give in to fear or despair. Let's use this knowledge to empower ourselves to build stronger communities and to create a world where disasters, whether natural or human-made, don't have the power to break us.
Damn, that was surprisingly inspiring for a conversation about the end of the world. I think I feel a little less doomed now.
That's the spirit.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on this deep dive into the wild world of natural disasters. We've covered a lot of ground, from the science behind these events to the ways we can protect ourselves and build a more resilient future. Stay safe out there. And remember, it's not just about surviving the storm, it's about learning how to weather the shitstorm together. Peace out.